Hey guys, this is Jordan from Worship Online, and today we're talking about building a reliable pedal board. So why is that important? I've toured for quite a while playing professional music, and I played in the church for 15 years, and I've pretty much had every piece of gear break at some point along the way. So having those awkward situations on stage in a live context is pretty embarrassing and very distracting to what you're really trying to accomplish in a worship setting. So the different things that we're gonna go over today about like cables and power supplies and choosing a pedal board and those details that don't get talked about a whole lot, it's gonna be really important to take note on when you're really trying to build something that's gonna bring you the best tone and deliver it consistently. So there's different little tricks and tips that I've learned over the years because I've been building my pedal boards for pretty much as long as I've been playing guitar, and also just been soldering cables for about a decade now. And I've really seen the importance of putting in the intentionality into the details of building something that's gonna be rock solid. So let's get started. So here's my pedal board. I have been using Pedal Train boards for quite a while now. I really love this company. I'm not endorsed by them in any way. I just really love their products, and there are countless people in the touring and professional industry that have used their products for a while. There's a reason why they're kind of a industry standard. This right here is a Pedal Train 2 case, but a trick that I've learned from my buddy Matt Podesla is that actually you can fit a Pedal Train 3 into the Pedal Train 2 case to save weight. So why is this important? In the touring world, you fly a lot and you need to keep your pedal board under 50 pounds. So this is a little way that I've been able to shave some weight, so I'm not over that 50-pound limit, and I save money for the artists and whatnot. But it also just makes trips in and out of church and loading in and out way easier. Pedal Train's cases, they're not as durable as other companies, but this has definitely lasted a few years for me. It's been really great. I've thought about getting a different case at different times with wheels on it, but so far this has worked great, and if something falls apart at some point, I'll change it up. But it has held together with a lot of touring the past few years pretty well. So let's open it up. So here's the Pedal Train 3 pedal board that I'm using. This is a discontinued model, unfortunately. They have a new version that's slightly shorter in height, but it's relatively the same pedal board. I've had different sizes of pedal boards over the years, but I've kind of always come back to this. Weight saving is really important to me, and I've been able to fit around close to 14 different pedals at different times with strategic placement and whatnot. And so I've never really needed anything more than that, and it's really been pretty suitable for a worship context and just touring, studio use, everything. So one of the reasons why I love Pedal Train pedal boards is simply because I love the way that they're designed. The material is very lightweight and it's durable. It's held up for, I've had this one for 8 years maybe, but it's very durable, it's very straightforward, and there's enough spacing between the different rows for cables. And I'll get to the importance of that in a bit, but it really allows you to arrange your pedals in different ways. Also, there's space for the power supplies underneath. And so right now, I just have one power supply, and I've had two different times. I've also had like a TA link here for running lines, XLR lines to my amps at long distances. So just putting Velcro in there and having it sitting there has been a very convenient factor to having a pedal board. Other pedal boards are flat, and it's kind of hard to keep everything organized and clean underneath. But just kind of an overview of how I pack my pedal board. I always like to keep 2 cables. Right now I have 2 different lengths. I have a 10-foot and a 15-foot. And the reason is for that, if I'm on a small stage and I don't need to be far from my pedal board, a lot of times I'll use the 10-footer just because it's more convenient and it saves tone, because the longer your cable runs, you're gonna lose a little bit of high and less, especially from your guitar to your pedal board, because it's not a buffered signal. I also use the shorter cable in the studio a lot. It's just less cluttered and better tone. It's just gonna sound a little bit better, but it's not gonna be massive. But so I always carry 2 cables because these can go down all the time. I've had cables go out a lot. So having a backup, I pretty much have a backup for everything, especially when I'm touring. I'll keep a separate Pelican case with backups for everything because everything breaks. So that's really important to me. I have a light, the bright switch. If I'm not on a dark stage, I don't really ever plug that in. Keep a power cable. And the way I have my power cable set up, because I'm running a fractal here and this requires its own IEC out, and I'm using this power supply underneath for my pedals that I'm using externally, I have this Y cable here to make it a little bit more convenient so I don't have to run 2 power cables. So I'll just plug this in and run 1 power line to a box. So I put Velcro around it just to keep it stuck to the pedal board there and easy to pack up. But that's pretty much it. I also always keep a spare cable on hand, and I try to make sure it's a very long cable that can run the full distance of the pedal board, because cables can go out a lot. It's pretty much the most frequently unreliable thing in a guitar rig. And so having one on hand, either for patching in another pedal that I want to use in the studio or something like that, or just because if something goes wrong, say in like sound check, like a cable's going out, I'm getting noise, I can quickly swap it and keep going with the set. So I like having this on hand at all times, right there on my pedal board. Okay, so let's talk about the most important factor in my opinion, the patch cables. So there's so many different routes that you can go when choosing which patch cables that you use, but I am a firm believer in soldered cables. You're gonna get the most reliable connection. Other cables are more convenient as you can build them yourself, and they're very quick to make, and you can easily make different lengths, and it's very little time. And you don't need a lot of like skills developed in order to learn how to solder and whatnot. But if you can learn how to solder, I did when I was 18, just watching YouTube videos, it's a very valuable skill in the long term as a guitarist, because you can swap out pickups on your guitar. I've had multiple input or output jacks on my guitars go bad, switches go bad, and whatnot over the years. So being able to fix that all myself, even on the road sometimes, has been really valuable. Really having a soldering connection is really important. And even in the soldered connections, you can go a number of different routes. There's the kind of like the smaller jacks and plugs that are gonna create more space for you on a pedal board, and they're gonna be thinner, they're gonna be more compact and whatnot. But usually those are a little bit harder to make, and they're not always, from my opinion, necessarily as reliable as the ones that have larger plugs. So the plugs that I love to use are Lava 229s, and they're based off of the Switchcraft pancake plug. And the reason is for that is because there's so much space in here for the 2 connections of the lead and the ground. There's not a lot of room for air for things to short out inside, which that can happen in some cables where the ground will touch the lead or vice versa and you'll lose signal. It's just a very easy design for building them, and you can just use Loctite on the screws when you're building them, and it's completely rugged. I use shrink wrap, that's the technical term for it, heat shrink tubing on the ends of the cables to prevent unnecessary flexing there, because that can wear down the solder joints as well. But if you don't have that soldered connection, it's very easy for those metal connections to come loose. And I've had that happen when I haven't used soldered cables many times. I've had many soldered cables go down, but I'd much rather have something that is continually reliable than something less reliable. But the thing is that's nice about these plugs in conjunction with a pedal train board is that you need a lot of space where they plug in at the pedals to go downwards, because that's pretty much the biggest downside to these, is that they kind of create some restrictions. So if you have a lot more space on your pedal board, like these gaps between the rows are wider, you can you have more flexibility in how you angle those plugs. And going downwards or on the back of the pedal board, they can go off the back and down through the back to the rest of the pedal board. So routing is a lot easier when you have a pedal train board or other pedal boards that have that spacing for these particular types of jacks. And these are really important to me just for reliability, so bringing those together, it's kind of the reasons why I use these products. So that's the instrument cables. Let's take a look underneath at some of the power. So here, I said earlier that I'm using this one power supply. And I've used two before, and one of the nice things about using two is that if one goes down, say in sound check or something like that, you can still power half your pedal board off of that one. So it's kind of like a redundancy aspect to having reliability. But right now I'm just using this one, and this is powering all the pedals outside of my fractal. I like to label them with painter's tape for the different milliamps that each output provides, especially with voltage as well. Because if you're plugging a pedal in with the wrong voltage, you can fry your pedal. Milliamps doesn't matter as much. You can always send a higher number of milliamps or a lower number of milliamps than a pedal requires, and it won't hurt the pedal. But if you send 12 volts to a pedal that can only handle 9 volts, you can fry it. So having this labeled is kind of a fail-safe for me, so I don't do something stupid, because a lot of times I'll swap out cables if I need a different length to reach over here or whatnot, or rearrange the 400s to over here just because I'm rearranging the pedals on top. So if I accidentally plug into the wrong voltage, it's game over, and I don't want to risk that. Another thing to note about the power cables is I love right angle, first and foremost. Not all power supplies come with right or 8 or so right angle plugs. Sometimes they come with straight and right angle, so I always end up buying a ton of extra right angles. I've noticed with the Voodoo Labs power supplies, this is a 4x4. Voodoo Labs are great, super reliable, consistent, industry standard. I've also had Strymon, they're great as well. If you can afford them, kind of the perk to having a Strymon is they have very high output and they're also international voltage. They automatically convert over, which is really handy. So the Voodoo Labs ones, a lot of times are pretty short when you buy them, so you have to buy longer ones. So that's helpful to keep that in mind if you're ordering products for your pedal board build, is to probably order a few more longer right angle plugs. So you've probably noticed by now that I have these little labels on my cables, and you're asking why is that? I do this simply because I'm always trying to think of worst case scenario. If this part of my board goes down, which it can, and it has for me, I want to be able to troubleshoot it as quickly as possible. Or also if I'm rearranging my pedal board, which I do all the time. Over the years, I've had so many different setups. It's really important to be able to quickly identify what that leads to. So I label them with numbers. Like this cable right here is 18, and I can quickly trace that to the cables on top. So that's just kind of a helpful little thing that I do. When it comes to keeping everything organized underneath with the power and patch cables, I like to use these zip tie that you can attach underneath your board. They're a really handy way to keep everything close to the board because you don't want anything hanging underneath. I don't make them too tight so that I can still pull the cables out if I need to, because I'm always rearranging, or if I need to troubleshoot, I want to be able to slip them through without having to cut them off sometimes. But it just keeps everything nice and tidy so it's not getting caught on something when you're pulling your board out. So in a number of other builds that you'll see with people, they'll have very clean cable lines, either on top of their board if they don't have space underneath, or underneath, and they measure their cables to be the exact length that they need. So I've done that before, but the problem is with that is that as guitarists, we love changing things up. We love new gear, we love new setups. I've changed my setup so many times. And so usually what I've found is that when people get a professional build by someone who creates this perfectly clean pedal board for them, is that you run into the problem where you want to rearrange things and you're usually using the same cables, or you're putting a different size pedal in that spot that you had before, or it has side jacks instead of top mount jacks. And so all those clean lines that you had all of a sudden aren't going to be clean anymore, or those cable lines won't reach where those jacks need to be for your new setup. And so I just like to build my cables in various lengths. I always have spare cables on hand of different lengths when I'm building my boards, and also when I'm on the road just for backups. But I just build them to different lengths so that I can quickly reorganize my pedal board if needed. So that's kind of why it seems a little bit messy under there compared to other builds. I like to have it clean, I like to have it compact and reliable, but I don't focus too much on having this perfectly clean, perfect length cable runs or anything like that. So that sums up how I approach building my pedal boards. Hopefully that was helpful to you guys. Everybody has a different approach to it, and this is kind of just my way of doing things. So take it as it is. If you want more information about how I approach my pedals and my tone and amps and various other things, feel free to check out our free masterclass that we have available. That'll be in the link below. And also just let us know if you have any questions in the comments, and we'll try to get back to you. Thanks, guys. There are so many different brands and types of amps out there, but there's really 3 main types.
The goal is just to make it sound as full plus articulate as possible.
In a lot of flow moments in worship, I'm always trying to find things that don't get in the way, that's not too distracting, but it's ambient and it's not just swelling. I'm always trying to challenge myself to play a part more than just doing atmospheric stuff. Tuning is probably the most important thing that we can talk about. I mean, but it's pretty simple. It's just like, make sure your guitar's in tune.
Yep. Just trust yours. If it sounds good, it sounds good. If it sounds bad, fix it.